I want to remind you one more time that we are approaching the Christmas season, and every one of you in your offering box has this pretty teal-colored envelope in your box. That is the envelope for the Lottie Moon Christmas offering for international missions. Our designated day of giving will be the second Sunday in December. That's the last day of the week of prayer for Lottie Moon, and I'm encouraging everyone to begin now and just pray very intentionally and very carefully and ask God how He would have you to give. You know that we've been doing a number of mission emphases throughout the year, and this is our last missions emphasis of 2018, and I'm encouraging you to give faithfully and give generously as you always do. This is our last chance to do missions in 2018, and I'd love for us to finish strong and do this up very nice. So we will have our designated day of giving on December the 9th. That's the second Sunday, the last Sunday of the week of prayer for Lottie Moon Missions. But you can turn your envelope into the office anytime you want, or you can put it in the offering anytime you want. Just make sure that you say Lottie Moon on the envelope. Guys, I think I'm ringing just a little bit. If you'll turn me down just a tad. Okay, which do you want? The good news or the bad news? Want the bad news first? Okay. Bad news, and it's really not bad news. The bad news is really just the lesser good news. The bad news is it's Christmas. And that means we're going to decorate. And the really good part of that is Miss Sue Early is on the ball, and she's ready to decorate. Still waiting for the other shoe to drop, aren't you? That means at the conclusion of worship today, men and courageous women, but mostly men, we need you to help move some decorations into the sanctuary. And if we all pitch in and do it real quick, it won't take but just a minute or two. And if you'll meet Miss Sue right down at the front at the end of worship, she has some instructions about what things they want and what things they don't want. So we'll make sure we get the things they want and not carry the things they don't want. Amen? Amen? Let's only do this once. Let's do it right and not have to go put some of it back. All right, Miss Sue, we will meet you at the end. That was one way for me not to forget to make that announcement at the end, was to make it at the beginning. All right, so now are you ready for the good news? The good news is, I believe I see Miss Candace Clemens sitting there in the back of the church, and I think she needs to hold up her left hand for us. There it is, y'all. No, let us see it. Turn it this way so we can see it. There it is. There is a new engagement ring on that finger. Congratulations, Candace. We are so happy for you, and just pray God's blessings on what He's doing in your life, and that's just wonderful. Thank you. All right. And yes, it is Christmas, so turn to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1. And we're going to begin reading in verse 18. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, beginning in verse 18. I'm going to read from the New American Standard Version of the Bible, and you please follow along with whatever translation of God's Word that you have with you this morning. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, beginning in verse 18. Matthew says, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ was as follows," the King James says, "on this wise. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child by the Holy Spirit. And Joseph, her husband, being a righteous man, and not wanting to disgrace her, planned to send her away secretly. But when he had considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child who has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And she will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Now all this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which translated means God with us. And Joseph awoke from his sleep, and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took Mary as his wife, but kept her a virgin until she gave birth to a son. And then notice the last line, and he called his name Jesus. Now if you would, just turn page, probably, and go to chapter 2 and find verse 13. In chapter 2, beginning in verse 13. Now when they had gone, this is speaking of the wise men, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night, and left for Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. And this was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, Out of Egypt I have called my son. All right, I hope you can tell I'm kind of excited about it being Christmas, and I want to go ahead this morning and set the record straight. I want it to be understood by everyone. I want this to be crystal clear. All of us who put up our Christmas trees early, before Thanksgiving, are now off the hook. Can I get an amen? How many of you were with me and got them up early? Now, I say, when I raise my hand and say I got our tree up early, that's like saying me and Daddy killed a bear. Mama put the tree up. Okay, listen, we are now officially off the hook. We can relax. We can take a deep breath. Thanksgiving Day has come and gone, and so now Christmas is completely in order, and all the Scrooge-like comments about early lights and early trees and early shopping can just stop. In other words, no more Jacob Den Hollander. Now, at this point, everybody's going, who is Jacob Den Hollander? Jacob Den Hollander is a PhD student in Louisville, Kentucky. I follow him on Twitter. And he wrote on Twitter this last week, I loved it. He said, because of my well-known opinions on holiday music and the trappings of Christmas, I am often referred to as a Scrooge or a Grinch. I am not a Scrooge or a Grinch, because both Scrooge and the Grinch eventually changed their minds. Now look. So my response to Jacob is, bah humbug, I am ready for Christmas, and it goes by too fast anyway, doesn't it? Is anybody else sensing this like I do? I mean, I see Christmas coming every year, and I get ready for it, and then the next thing you know, it's gone. And I'm wondering, what happened? How did it go by so fast? In October, you're thinking, okay, just 2 months to go. In November, you're thinking, okay, just a month to go. And the next thing you know, it's January, and you're saying, where did Christmas go? And so that's why today, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, even though it's technically not even the Advent season yet, I wanted to preach a Christmas message. And in particular, I wanted to preach this Christmas message. I'm telling you that Christmas sneaks by too quickly. And I want to Christmas character of all. As Christmas rushes by, Joseph is usually the one who gets the least attention. Everybody knows about the angels, everybody knows about the shepherds, but seldom do we give Joseph any attention, and really it's no wonder, because if you read the gospel stories of Christmas, everybody else is in the limelight. Now think about it. The angels show up as a heavenly choir and sing, and wow, I mean, how do you top that? The shepherds, they go tell everybody they can find that the child is born. Both Mary and Elizabeth have these beautiful, long speeches in the Gospels. Herod even gets to chat with the wise men, even though he's a villain. But Joseph gets, read the Gospels, check it out, not one word is uttered by Joseph. We read about his actions, but he has 0 lines. He doesn't get to talk at Christmas. Apparently Joseph is the strong, silent type, but nobody seems to appreciate him. Pastor Joe Gregory used to tell a story about children looking at a nativity set, and they noticed Mary and the baby Jesus and all of the angels, or the animals there in the stable, and even the shepherds. And finally one of the children, looking at all of the figures in the nativity set, says, "Well, I wonder which one is Joseph." One of the children points out an old man leaning on a staff and says, "Well, that must be Joseph." Immediately one of the other children disagrees and says, "Well, Mary wouldn't want an old man like that." And on it goes. Nobody's quite sure what to say about Joseph. So to kind of kick Christmas off this morning, I want to talk to you about the forgotten man of Christmas, Joseph. And I want to tell you that what he is and who he is deserves our attention. And since Christmas is going to fly by anyway, I want us to think about him for a minute and what he can teach us. I want to show you a number of things that I think are important. Number one, I want us to see that he is a man of commitment. Joseph is a guy who knows how to stick with his business. And I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like here lately in our world today, people have forgotten how to keep their promises. They've forgotten how to keep their word. And as a pastor, I would tell you, I see that especially in terms of the way that people keep their promises to God. Oh, they make promises here real quick. God help me, God get me out of this mess. But then when it comes time to live it out, not so much. In general, it seems like people are too flighty, too fickle, too impulsive, too irresponsible. I don't hear a whole lot of amens. I know some of y'all are thinking about somebody right now, aren't you? Always changing their minds, unable to commit. The great German pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said that people are like the crowd at a bullfight. They cheer 1 minute for the bull and the next minute for the toreador. They're just really out there to cheer. If you know your history, you may recognize the name Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell was the one who took the British throne away from Charles I and established the Commonwealth. In 1650, Cromwell and John Lambert were going into a town, and the streets of the town were lined with people cheering their appearance in their town. Lambert turned to Cromwell and he said, "It is good to see that the people are with us." And Cromwell chastised him and said, "Lambert, you should never trust applause. I promise you these same people would be cheering just as loudly if you and I were about to be executed." Well, that's not Joseph. He is not a person to vacillate with the wind. Verse 18 says that he and Mary were betrothed. King James says espoused. The NIV says pledged. You may have any number of words that are in your particular translation, but in the modern world, the word that we would use normally to translate that passage is we would use the word engaged. But that really doesn't cover the meaning of what's happening in the New Testament. In New Testament times, a man and woman, Candace, I don't know if you would go for the New Testament plan or not. The New Testament plan was that a couple was married in two stages. They were first married, but not living together. Not like engagement. They were officially, legally married, but they did not live together. It was kind of an unusual thing, but this is how they expressed their commitment in New Testament times. It was called that first, and this usually went on for a full year, and it was called the Kiddushin. The Kiddushin was the name that the Jews had for it. So they did not live together, but they were legally married. And if for whatever reason they did not survive, if the relationship did not survive that first year, they would still have to get a full and complete legal divorce. So in that first year, Joseph has discovered that Mary is pregnant. He knows the child is not his. Look at verse 19. Verse 19, there's a statement there that I don't think we pay enough attention to. It says that Joseph was a righteous man. That means he had an opinion. That means he had some thoughts about the subject. That means when he discovered that Mary was pregnant, he didn't just say, well, okay. He cared about the law of God. He cared about their promises that they had made to each other. He cared about morality. He did not take the situation lightly, and as we read in the rest of the text, in his mind, the marriage was over. He was an old-fashioned guy. When he made a commitment, he meant, this is my commitment, and he was going to live by it. So Joseph is troubled in verse 19. It says Joseph, her husband, because they were in that first year, the year of the Kiddushin, he was a righteous man. But if we read on in the text, we also find out that he was a man of compassion. Even though he is a righteous man, I love what it says. He did not want to disgrace Mary. After all, she had legally been his wife now for a few months. He cared about the law. He cared about what should be, but he also cared about her. And he did not want her to end up like the woman brought before Jesus in the Gospel of John in chapter 8. You probably know that story well. You remember in that story, the crowd brings a woman into the presence of Jesus and the crowd claims this woman was taken in the very act of adultery, and the Old Testament prescription for that was to stone her. That's what the law said. And Jesus acknowledged that's what the law says. And then he looked at the crowd and said, whoever among you is without sin, cast the first stone. You remember that story? But without Jesus there, that story could have ended up being something far, far worse. And Joseph did not want Mary to end up in that kind of situation. So verse 19 says that Joseph planned to send her away secretly, privately, quietly. He could not tolerate what had happened, but he also could not dispense justice without compassion. Now, here's what I want you to understand. We don't understand Joseph. no sense in this play between Joseph was a righteous man and Joseph not wanting to disgrace her. We don't understand Joseph if we don't see him as a man having gut-wrenching, sleepless nights over this. Joseph is trying to live by the law, but thank goodness he is also a man of compassion. And he is a man having a life crisis. And it's during one of those sleepless nights that we find out that Joseph is also a man of great courage. If you can imagine, somehow, finally, one night he falls asleep and God comes to him in a dream and tells him what is actually happening. The child is the Messiah at long last. God has fulfilled his promise and is sending his son into the world. Verse 24 says that when Joseph, look at the verse, we've got to see this. Joseph had courage now. When Joseph woke up from that dream, he was immediately obedient to what God had revealed to him. Look what verse 24 says. And Joseph awoke from his sleep and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. And what does it say? And took Mary as his wife. When Joseph got up from that dream, he went to Mary, he went to the family and said, the kiddushin is over. Now let's move immediately into the nisu'im, the second phase of marriage. That took some courage. Because you remember, Joseph had found out that Mary was pregnant. If Joseph had found out, come on, you know what I'm going to say. Oh, everybody, it's a small town. And they didn't even have Facebook. Everybody knew. And Joseph, taking this step, knew that he was in for months of, can you believe what old Joseph did? Oh, people will talk, don't they? People love to talk. And that was not going to be kept quiet. And so entering into this marriage, moving from phase 1 into phase 2, took courage. Now I'm going to show you something, though, that really is the icing on this cake. Look at verse 25. It says that Joseph kept her a virgin until she gave birth to the son. And then notice, you've got to see the pronouns here. And it says, and he, that's Joseph, called the name of the child Jesus. In Jewish culture, for a father to name a child meant that he accepted the child and made the child his. Joseph was obedient to God immediately and fully, and he did that with courage, not only making Mary his wife in the fullest sense of the word, but ultimately naming the child, which meant that he accepted the child as his own. I want you to see Joseph as a man of commitment to the law, but also compassion to a person, but also courageous, full of courage, in the sense of what God had told him to do. God put a plan in your life? Has God given you a mission to undertake? Has God called you to do the ultimate thing, teach a class of 5th grade boys? I mean, whatever it is, if God has given you something to do it with courage. That's what Joseph did. Now, one last word. I began by telling you that Joseph was a man of commitment, and I want to show you that lived out in even a fuller sense of the word. And I want you to look at the second passage that we read in chapter 2. If you'll just flip over again and find chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. In the interim, in the verses we did not read, the wise men have come looking for the child, and they have been interviewed by Herod, who feigns interest in the child, what he really wants to do, because he is one of those incredibly insecure and jealous rulers. He wants to find the child so that he can kill the child and not have any threat on his rule on the throne. And so he tells the wise men, oh, make sure and come tell me when you find the child. Now, I want to come too. God warns the wise men, and they go off on their own way. That makes Herod mad. He begins to search for the child. And God again speaks to Joseph in a dream and says, now, I want you to take the child, go into Egypt. Now look at verse 14 in that second passage. I love this. Verse 14 says that Joseph, when he wakes up from the dream, gets up in the middle of the night. Now, ladies, how many of you would like for your husband to wake you up in the middle of the night and say, pack your bag, 2 o'clock in the morning, pack your bag? What? You've lost it, haven't you? I mean, can you imagine how this conversation went? In the middle of the night, verse 14 says, he got up, wrapped up Mary, wrapped up Jesus, and they leave in the dark of night for Egypt. I just love Joseph for this. And with a little bit of sanctified imagination, I think I can hear Joseph talking to himself as he gathers a few belongings and kind of wraps them up in a bag. And I just believe that Joseph was one of those guys who talked to himself while he worked. I think, working on your own, he probably did that. And I think maybe if you listen very carefully, you could hear him saying, Herod, no way, not today, you're not putting your hands on this baby, we are leaving this town right now, and we are getting away from you. And I'll tell you what, Mr. Herod, if you're smart, you get yourself right with God, you have no idea who you are messing with here. I can hear that. In other words, what Joseph is telling us here in verse 14, by his immediate actions, is that this child is his. Y'all know that Lee and I will, on a regular basis and with very little prompting, and I promise you, very little prompting, we'll show you a picture of our foster granddaughter. And we're waiting for that day when we can take foster off granddaughter. And we covet your prayers on that. But let me just tell you, in our hearts, she's ours. We're there. And my arm didn't have to be twisted a whole lot. I mean, I would dare say she's probably the prettiest granddaughter that's ever been born. And I think that's the way Joseph is. He knows this child is the Lord's, but in his heart, this baby is his. Mary, we're not taking any chances. We don't have time to wait around for breakfast. We'll stop at McDonald's on the way. Okay, they open at 6 or 5, whenever they open. We'll get mix something. But we got to go. We got to go now. It's too important. And that's the way you think about your own child, isn't it? What we're seeing in these two passages is that Joseph is a man of commitment. He loves the Word of God. He's also a man of compassion. He loves his family and his people. And who doesn't? But God has given him a word. And he's a man of courage. He's taken the child of his own. And if you wanted to add another word in this life scene, we're seeing Joseph as a man of help us to be people like Joseph. People who listen to God, pay attention to what He says, and show it, and stand by it, and don't back down just because the winds of the world blow a different direction from time to time. But in the process, still love folks and take care of them. I don't know about you, that's the kind of person that I want to be. I want to be someone like Joseph. And I wanted you to see that picture today. And having shown you that picture, I can officially say to you, Merry Christmas. And the season is on us. And let's act like people who know what that means. Will you stand and pray with me, please? Father, thank you for the picture of Joseph. And all of us join together in praying that we would be people who love you, love your word, love what you told us to do, and act like it and stand by it while taking care of others in the process. Father, would you give us that kind of conviction, that kind of courage, and even that kind of compassion. This morning, as we stand before you, we've done a lot of things in the last few days, and maybe we're even a little tired. All of the Thanksgiving activities, we've been with family, we've run a lot of errands, we've been very busy, and yet we're here in your house because we know it's the Lord's Day and we know that we should be here, and that's good. But maybe we're just a little tired. And maybe our minds aren't completely focused. But we've heard the story of the man that you chose to be the family for the Messiah. And we don't want to fail to learn from that. And so in these few moments that we have here together at the end of our time of worship, would you help all of us, men and women, to compare ourselves to this man that you chose? Do we love your word? Is it ruling our lives? Do we make our decisions based on what the word has said? Do we watch out for other folks, family, friends, church members, even folks in the community? Do we serve them with an open heart? Are we courageous about what you've called us to do? Those are the kind of questions we're asking, Father, this morning. Are we that kind of people? Would you help us to see the truth this morning? Would you speak clearly in our hearts as you always do? Would you help us to choose how we're going to live from this point on? In other words, Father, help us to make the most of this time of invitation. This is your time to speak to us. We pray that you would help us to be people